You know how a certain smell can pull you straight back into a memory? For most people, the scent of pine brings comfort, maybe a Christmas morning or a peaceful walk in the woods. But for me, that sharp, clean scent will always be the smell of fear. It takes me back to one afternoon at my son-in-law's lake house, a day that began with smiles and small talk and ended with a silence so deep it could freeze your soul. I remember sitting a little away from the main table, just watching my daughter, Lena. Have you ever watched your child trying so hard to fit in, to belong somewhere they clearly don't? She was flitting about, pouring expensive scotch for her husband, Preston, and his father, Garrett, laughing at jokes that weren't even funny. Her laughter was too bright, too fragile, like glass ready to shatter at any second. It was the sound of a little girl still trying to prove she was good enough, hoping that maybe this time she'd earn their love. My heart ached with every brittle giggle. That big, beautiful house on Lake Tahoe wasn't a home. It was a shrine to their egos. Dark wood everywhere, cold glass windows staring out over the water like lifeless eyes. Everything was perfect. The manicured lawn, the expensive cars by the gate, the polished silver on the table. But there wasn't a trace of warmth in the whole place. I only ever went there for Lena. "Please, Mom," she'd say, "it's important to them that we're all together." But I always knew it wasn't about them. It was important to her. She wanted the dream of a real family so badly that she kept pretending it already existed. As the afternoon dragged on, the scotch flowed too freely. Garrett and Preston grew louder, their laughter turning sour, their words cutting deeper. I could feel it coming, that slow shift from charm to cruelty. Then Garrett's booming voice cut through the air. "Why is our little city girl all bundled up?" he teased, his eyes fixed on Lena. She had on a thick sweater, and for good reason. The wind whipping off the lake was icy. She gave a nervous little smile. "It's just windy, Mr. Garrett." Preston, always his father's echo, smirked. "Greenhouse generation," he said mockingly. "Back in my day, girls swam in October. It made 'em tough." A cold knot twisted in my stomach. I knew that tone. I'd heard it before, the way men sharpen cruelty just for sport. "Leave her be," I said softly. My voice wasn't loud, but they heard it. Preston shot me a look, that flicker of malice behind his eyes. He never liked it when I intervened. "Don't worry, Eleanor," he said smoothly, winking at Lena. "We're just having a bit of fun." But then I saw the look between him and his father. That silent exchange, that flash of something dark and dangerous. A predator's spark before it strikes. Garrett pushed back his chair and stood, towering over everyone. "Well," he said, stretching his arms, "let's just see how tough our Lena really is." My heart started pounding. Before I could even stand, they had grabbed her by the arms. Lena still thought it was some kind of twisted joke. "Preston, no! Let me go!" She laughed nervously, her voice breaking as they dragged her toward the pier. I stumbled after them, shouting, "Stop! You're drunk! This isn't funny!" But to them, I was nothing, just background noise. They hauled her to the very end of the pier, where the water was black and bone cold. "No, please don't!" Lena's voice cracked. The laughter was gone now, replaced by real fear. I reached for Preston, trying to pull him back,
but he shoved me so hard I stumbled onto the boards. And before I could even scream, they pushed her. She vanished beneath the surface with a dull splash, the kind that echoes forever in your mind. For 3 long seconds, the world stopped. Then, Garrett and Preston burst into laughter, loud, ugly, inhuman laughter, as if they'd just told the best joke of their lives. Lena didn't come back up. My scream caught in my throat, strangled by horror. Then suddenly, her head broke the surface. Her face was pale. A trickle of blood dark against her wet skin, running down from her temple. Her eyes empty. She wasn't fighting. She wasn't even there anymore. And then she sank again. That's when I finally found my voice, a sound no human should ever have to make. It wasn't a scream. It was a raw, animal cry. "Help! She hit her head! She's drowning!" They just stood there. Preston waved a hand like I was an annoying child. "Stop the drama, Eleanor. She can swim." They turned their backs and walked away, as if my daughter wasn't slipping beneath the water behind them. "Where are you going?" I shrieked, my voice cracking. "She's dying!" The car doors slammed. The engine roared. Preston leaned out the window, still grinning. "Don't ruin our evening, mother-in-law." And they were gone.
Sometimes, when you think your heart is breaking, something else happens instead. It doesn't break. It freezes. As I stood there, staring at the ripples spreading across the black water, the panic inside me turned into something cold, hard, and clear. Then, out of the silence, I heard the distant putter of a small boat, a fisherman. I couldn't scream anymore, so I just raised my arm and pointed. He must have seen the horror in my face because he gunned the engine and sped toward the pier. He didn't ask questions. He just pulled her from the lake, my beautiful girl, her skin blue and still. As he laid her in the bottom of his boat, the ice inside me shattered into 1,000 sharp pieces. My hands were trembling, but my mind was calm, almost unnaturally calm. I called 911 and gave them our location in a voice that didn't even sound like mine. While the fisherman fought to bring my daughter back, I saw flashes of her life, a scraped knee, her graduation smile, her wedding day. And I heard my own voice again, whispering what I'd wanted to say that day. "Don't do it, baby. They'll destroy you." But I had stayed silent. I thought I was protecting her. I was wrong. By the time the ambulance arrived, the woman I used to be, the quiet, polite mother-in-law who kept the peace, had died right there on that pier. The flashing lights painted the pier in red and white. Paramedics swarmed around Lena's limp body, their voices sharp and efficient. "Pulse weak, severe hypothermia, head trauma." It felt like I was watching it all from somewhere far away, like my soul had stepped outside my body and was just observing. One of them turned to me, asking questions, my name, what had happened, how long she'd been under. I answered automatically, though my mind was miles away. I could hear the whir of the stretcher being loaded, the doors of the ambulance slamming shut, and then the siren wailed into the fading light, carrying my daughter away. I stood there long after the sound disappeared, staring at the ripples where she'd gone under. Then, almost mechanically, I pulled out my phone. My fingers were steady now, too steady. I scrolled through my contacts until I found a name I hadn't said aloud in over 10 years. Isaac. He was my brother, once one of the best investigative journalists in the country. He never played by the rules, and that's why he'd been cast out. He dug too deep, uncovered too much. But I knew him. That fire inside him never really died. When he finally answered, his voice was rough and tired. Yeah? Isaac, I whispered. It's me. There was a long pause on the line. Then, quietly, he said, I'm listening, Eleanor. He didn't ask what was wrong. He didn't need to. I looked down the gravel road where Preston and Garrett's car had disappeared into the trees. They're heading home now, I said softly. Do what you do best. I didn't say another word. I hung up as the ambulance siren faded into the distance. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid. I felt something else, a strange, terrifying calm, the kind that comes when you've made a decision you can't take back. It was the calm of someone who's just lit a match and knows the fire will burn everything down. At the hospital, the world turned sterile, white walls, flickering fluorescent lights, and the thick, heavy smell of bleach. I sat in that waiting room for what felt like forever. Time didn't move. It stretched. 1 hour passed, then another. Finally, a young doctor with tired eyes came out. He looked at me with a gentleness that almost broke me. She's in critical condition, he said quietly, but stable. She has a concussion, severe hypothermia, and water in her lungs. But she's alive. Those words didn't comfort me. They anchored me. They meant there was still something left to fight for and someone to fight against. They let me see her for 5 minutes. She looked impossibly small in that hospital bed, pale, fragile, covered in tubes and wires. A dark stain had spread across the bandage on her head. I touched her hand, cold and still, and something inside me shifted. The love I had for her didn't fade. It changed. It hardened. It turned into something ancient, the instinct of a mother ready to protect her child no matter the cost. When I stepped out of the room, a nurse approached me holding a huge bouquet of white lilies. The scent hit me like a slap, strong, suffocating, funeral. There's been a delivery for your daughter, she said softly, handing me the envelope tucked inside.
I knew who it was from before I even opened it. The embossed paper, the elegant calligraphy, all arrogance and mockery. Inside, a single sentence was written. My dear, let's not let your mother's theatrics spoil our fun. I read it twice. It wasn't an apology. It was a declaration of war. They didn't feel guilt. They didn't even understand what they'd done. They thought this was all still a game, and that they were still in control. They had no idea that I had already rewritten the rules. I turned to the nurse. Please throw these away, I said evenly. My daughter is allergic. She hesitated, pity in her eyes, but she took them. The moment she walked away, I sat down again, my gaze fixed on the ICU door. I wasn't praying. I wasn't crying. I was planning. The woman I used to be, the one who smiled through insults and stayed quiet to keep the peace, was gone. What replaced her was someone colder, clearer, and infinitely more dangerous. That night, I sat in that hard plastic chair listening to the faint rhythm of the machines keeping my daughter alive. I thought of the pine-scented air at the lake, the sound of Garrett's laughter, Preston's smirk, and the splash. Always the splash. They thought they had won. They thought I was broken, but they had no idea what they had just unleashed. The next afternoon, while I stepped outside the hospital for a breath of air, my phone rang. Unknown number. It was Isaac. His voice was rough, tired, but focused. He said, "I have something." He grit his teeth. He'd found an old case, 22 years old. Same lake, different victim. A man named Malcolm Pierce, business partner of Garrett Vanderin. They'd gone fishing together, only Garrett came back. Garrett claimed Pierce was drunk and fell overboard, an accident. Isaac had tracked down the retired detective who handled the case. The man confessed he'd been paid to close it. A thick envelope of cash and a photo of his college-age daughter were enough to silence him.
Pierce had written letters to his sister before he died, saying Garrett had cheated him out of the company and that he was going to the authorities. A week later, he accidentally drowned. A chill deeper than any lake water settled inside me. For years, my instincts had whispered that Garrett was a monster. Now I had proof. "What now?" I asked. "Now," Isaac said, "we have leverage. They think this is family drama. They have no idea what game we're really playing." He was right. This wasn't just about what they did to Lena. This was about truth, justice that had been buried underwater for 2 decades. 3 days later, I sat by Lena's bedside, watching her sleep. Machines beeped softly. Outside, the sun slid over the hospital parking lot. Far away, I imagined Garrett Vanderin in his leather chair, still smug, thinking this would all blow over. And then I pictured the phone call that would change everything. Isaac's story hitting the press, headlines spreading like wildfire. "Businessman linked to 22-year-old drowning scandal." I imagined Garrett's smirk fading as his powerful friends stopped answering his calls, their doors closing one by one. The empire he built on fear began to crack. Isaac called me from a secure line. "He's panicking, running around like a trapped animal. He'll send people after me, just letting you know." I didn't worry. Isaac was a ghost. This was his battlefield. That same night, while Garrett's men kicked down the door of an old empty apartment, Isaac sat quietly in a hotel room and hit publish. The story exploded. Photos, files, the detective's confession, the lilies, and that cruel note, and of course, what happened to my daughter. Garrett's empire collapsed within hours. His name turned to poison. Preston followed soon after, his arrogance replaced with fear. A month later, I stood with Lena in the middle of an empty house that smelled of cardboard and dust. She was quiet, stronger somehow. The desperate need to please was gone from her eyes. She had filed for divorce. Preston's letters from jail went straight to the trash.
"Where do we go now, Mom?" she asked softly. I smiled and pulled a familiar set of keys from my pocket. I bought our old apartment back, the little one near the library. It needs some fixing, but it still feels like home. Maybe it's time we write a new ending. A real smile spread across her face, the first I'd seen in years. Driving away from that cold mansion, the evening light spilling across the road, I finally understood what freedom felt like. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't seeing them punished. It was this: my daughter beside me, safe. A quiet home waiting. A life that was ours again. A mother's love doesn't shout. It endures. And sometimes, that quiet, unbreakable love is the force that can move the entire world.